Okay.
What's happening?
What is this?
Yeah, be
Chapter
happening.
19.
Mhm.
Okay.
19.
Yeah, 19.
Chapter 19. Oh gosh, this is very triggering. Whenever I hear chapter 19. Okay. Chapter 19. There is no use telling me that you are going to be good, cried Lord Henry, dipping his white fingers into a red copper bowl filled with rose water. You are quite perfect. Pray don't change. Doran shook his head.
No, Harry. I've done too many dreadful things in my life. I'm not going to do any more. I began my good actions yesterday. Oh no. Oh no. Are you Robot Kaylee?
Oh God.
Oh,
Okay.
oh,
I'm
wait.
gonna
Oh, wait. I think you're back.
I don't know. I don't think so. I gotta hop off. I'll be back.
Okay. Okay. And she's gone. Well, it was nice to hear from Robot Kaylee. We haven't heard from her in a while. And she's back.
Think my family's draining the Wi-Fi.
Uh,
Versus. Okay. Where are we at? Is it the where line?
yeah.
Where okay. Where were you yesterday?
In the country, Harry. I was staying at a little inn by myself.
My dear boy, said Lord Henry, smiling. Anybody can be anybody can be good and there are no temptations there. That is the reason why people who live out of town are so absolutely uncivilized. Civilization is not by any means an easy thing to do, easy thing to attain to. There are only two ways by which man can reach it. One is being cultured, the other by being corrupt. Country people have no opportunity of either, so they stagnate.
Culture and corruption.
Echoed Dorian.
I have known something of both. It seems terrible to me now that they should ever be found together. For I have a new ideal, Harry. I am going to alter. I think I have altered.
You have not told me what your good action was. Or did you say that you had done more than one? His companion as he spilled into his plate a little crimson pyramid of seeded strawberries, and threw a perforated shell-shaped spoon, snowed white sugar upon them. Oh, that is extremely sweet.
I can tell you, Harry. It is not a story I could tell to anyone else. I spared somebody. It sounds vain, but you understand what I mean. She was quite beautiful and wonderfully like Sybil Vane. I think it was that which first attracted me to her. You remember Sybil, don't you? How long ago that seems. Well, Hetty was not one of our own class, of course. She was a simple girl in a village, but I really loved her. I am quite sure that I loved her. All during this wonderful May that we have been having, I used to run down and see her 2 or 3 times a week. Yesterday she met me in a little orchard. The apple blossoms kept tumbling down her hair, and she was laughing. We were to have gone away together this morning at dawn. Suddenly, I determined to leave her as flower-like as I had found her.
I I should think the novelty of the emotion must have given you a thrill of real pleasure, Dorian. Interrupted Lord Henry. But I can finish your ideal for you. You gave her good advice and broke her heart. That was the beginning of your reformation.
Harry, you are horrible. You mustn't say these dreadful things. Hetty's heart is not broken. Of course, she cried and all that, but there is no disgrace upon her. She can live, like Perdita, in her garden of mint and marigold.
And weep over a faithless Florizel, said Lord Henry, laughing, as he leaned back in his chair. My dear Dorian, you have the most curiously boyish mood. Do you think this girl will ever really be content with anyone of her own? I suppose she will be married some day to a rough carter or a grinning plowman. Well, the fact of having met you and loved you will teach her to despise her husband. She will be rich. From a moral point of view, I cannot say that I think much of your great renunciation, even as a beginning. It is poor. Besides, how do you know that Hetty isn't floating at the present moment in some starlit mill pond with lovely water lilies round her, like Ophelia?
I can't bear this, Harry. You mock at everything, and then suggest the most serious tragedies. I'm sorry I told you now. I don't care what you say to me. I know I was right in acting as I did. Poor Hetty. As I rode past the farm this morning, I saw her white face at the window, like a spray of jasmine. Don't let us talk about it any more, and don't try to persuade me that the first good action I have done for years, the first little bit of self-sacrifice I have ever known, is really a sort of sin. I want to be better. I'm going to be better. Tell me something about yourself. What is going on in town? I have not been to the club for days.
Oh gosh. The people are oh people are still discussing poor Basil's appearance. Oh,
I should have thought that they had got tired of that by this time.
said Dorian, pouring himself out some wine and frowning slightly. My dear boy, they have only been talking about it for 6 weeks, and the British public are really not equal to the mental strain of having more than one topic every 3 months. They have been very fortunate lately, however. They have had my own divorce case and Alan Campbell's suicide. Now they have that. Now they have got the mysterious disappearance of an artist. Scotland Yard still insists that the man in the grey ulster who left for Paris by the midnight train on the 9th of November was poor Basil, and the French police declare that Basil never arrived in Paris at all. I suppose. Oh God. I suppose in about a fortnight we shall be told that he has been seen in San Francisco. God, I think I had a stroke.
Oh man, don't do that.
Oh no,
Oh,
I forbid it.
San Francisco.
San
San
Francisco.
Francisco.
San Francisco. Like in America.
Yeah. San Francisco. It is an odd thing, but everyone who disappears is said to be seen at school. It must be a delightful and possess all the attraction of the world.
Of the next world?
Oh God. And possess all the attractions of the next world. What become of me?
I don't know, man. What's happening to you? We're almost there. We're almost done.
16. No, just...
What do you think has happened to Basil?
asked Dorian, holding up his burgundy against the light and wondering how it was that he could discuss the matter so calmly. I have not the slightest idea. Basil chooses to hide himself. It is no business of mine if he is dead. I don't want to think about him. Death is the only thing that ever terrifies me. I hate it.
Why?
Said the younger man, wearily. Because, said Lord Henry, beneath his nostrils the gilt trellis of an open vinaigrette box. One can survive everything nowadays except that. Death and vulgarity are the only two facts in the 19th century that one cannot explain away. Let us have our coffee in the music room, Dorian. You must play Chopin to me. Chopin?
Yeah.
The man with whom my wife ran away with exquisitely. Poor Victoria. I was very fond of her. The house is rather lonely without her. Of course, married life is merely a habit, a bad habit, but then regrets the loss of one's worst. Perhaps one regrets them the most. They are such an essential part of one's personality. Dorian said nothing, but rose from the table and passing into the next room, sat down to the piano and let his fingers stray across the white and black ivory of the keys. After the coffee had been brought in, stopped. He looked over his and looking over at Lord Henry, said,
Harry, did it ever occur to you that Basil was murdered?
"Oh my God." Lord Henry yawned. Basil was very popular and always wore a Waterbury. Why should he have been murdered? He was not clever enough to have enemies, of course. He had a wonderful genius for painting. But a man can paint like Velasquez and yet be as dull as possible. Basil was really rather dull. He only interested me once, and that was when he told me years ago that he had a wild adoration and that you were the dominant motive of his art.
I was very fond of Basil.
Said Dorian with a note of sadness in his voice.
But don't people say that he was murdered?
Oh, some of the papers do. It does not seem to me to be at all probable. I know there are dreadful places but Basil was not the sort of man to have gone to them. He had no curiosity. It was his chief defect.
What would you say, Harry, if I told you that I had murdered Basil?
Oh my God, what the fuck? Said the younger man. He was deadly after he had spoken. I would say, my dear fellow, that you are posing for a character that doesn't suit you. All crime is vulgar, just as all vulgarity is crime. It is not in you, Dorian, to commit a murder. I am sorry if I hurt your vanity by saying so, but I assure you it is true. crime belongs exclusively to the lower order. I don't blame them in the smallest degree. I should fancy that crime was to them what art is to us, simply a method of procuring extraordinary sensation.
A method of procuring sensations. Do you think, then, that a man who has once committed a murder could possibly do the same crime again? Don't tell me that.
Oh, anything becomes a pleasure if one does it often, cried Lord Henry, laughing. That is one of the most important secrets of life. I should fancy, however, that murder is always a mistake. One should never do anything that one cannot talk about after dinner. But let us pass from poor Basil. I wish I could believe that he had come to such a really romantic end as you suggest. But I can't. I dare say he fell into the Seine of an omnibus, and that the conductor, and that the conductor, oh, and that the conductor hushed up the scandal. Oh, damn conductor.
the Not the conductor.
Yes, I should fancy that was his end. I see him lying now on his back, under those dull green waters, with the heavy barges floating over, and long weeds catching his hair. Do you know, I don't think he would have done much more good work. During the last 10 years, his painting had gone off very much. Dorian heaved a sigh, and Lord Henry strolled across the room, and began to stroke the head of a curious Java parrot, a large, grey plum- plumage bird
Plumage, yeah.
with plumage bird with pink crest and tail, that was balancing itself upon a bamboo pole. As as his pointed finger touched, it dropped the white girth of crinkled lids over black, glass-like eyes, and began to sway backwards and forward. Yes, he continued, turning round and taking his handkerchief out of his pocket. His painting had quite gone off. It seemed to me to have lost something. It had lost an ideal. When you had, oh God, when you and to be great friends, he ceased to be a great artist. What was it? What was it separated you? I suppose he bored you. If so, he never forgave you. It's a habit bores. By the way, what has become of that wonderful portrait he did of you? I don't think I've seen it since he finished it. Oh, I remember you tell your. Oh, oh, I remember your telling me years ago that you had sent it down to Selby, and that it had got mislaid or stolen on the way. You never got it back. What a pity. It was really it was really a masterpiece. I remember I wanted to buy it. I wish I had it now. It belonged to Basil's best period. Since then, his work was that curious mixture of bad painting and good intention that always entitles a man called a representative British artist. Did you ever did you advertise for it? You should,
I forget.
said Dorian.
I suppose I did, but I never really liked it. I am sorry I sat for it. The memory of the thing is hateful to me. Why do you talk of it? It used to remind me of those curious lines in some play. Hamlet, I think. How do they run? Like the painting of a sorrow, a face without a heart. Yes, that
Mm.
is what it was like.
Lord Henry laughed. If a man treats life artistically, his brain is his heart, he answered, sinking into an armchair. Dorian Gray shook his head and struck soft chords.
Can you say that again?
Oh, Dorian Gray shook his head and struck soft chords on the piano.
Like the painting of a sorrow.
He repeated,
A face without a heart.
the elder man lay back and looked at him, half-closed eyes. By the way, Dorian, he said after a pause, what does it profit a man if he gain the whole world and lose? How does the quotation his own soul? The music jarred, and Dorian Gray started and stared at his friend.
Why do you ask me that, Harry?
My dear fellow, said Lord Henry, elevating his eyebrows in surprise, I asked because I thought you might be able to give me an answer. That is all. I was going through the park last Sunday, and close by the Marble Arch there stood a little crowd, shabby looking, listening to some vulgar street preacher. As I passed by, I heard the man yelling out that question to his audience. It struck me as being rather dramatic. London is very rich in curious effects of that kind. A wet Sunday, an uncouth Christian in a mackintosh, a ring of sickly white faces under a broken roof, of dripping umbrellas, and a wonderful phrase flung into the air by shrill, hysterical lips. It was really very good in its way, quite a suggestion. I thought of telling the prophet that art, but that man had not. I am afraid, however, he would not have understood me.
Don't, Harry. The soul is a terrible reality. It can be bought and sold and bartered away. It can be poisoned or made perfect. There is a soul in each one of us. I know it.
Do you feel quite sure of that, Dorian?
Quite sure.
Ah, then it must be an illusion. Thing one feels absolutely certain about are never true. That is the fatality of faith, and the lesson of romance. How grave you are! Don't be serious. What have you or I to do with the superstitions of our age? No, we have given up our belief in the soul. Play me something. Play me a nocturne, Dorian. And as you play, tell me in a low voice how you've kept your youth. You must have some secret. I am only 10 years older than you are, and I am wrinkled and worn and yellow. You are really wonderful, Dorian. You have never looked more charming than you do today. You remind me of the day I saw you. You are rather cheeky, very shy, and absolutely extraordinary. You have changed, but not in appearance. I wish you would tell me your secret to get back my youth. I would do anything in the world except take exercise, get up early, or be respectable. Youth, there is nothing like it. It's absurd to talk of the ignorant. The only people whose opinions I listen now, with any respect, are people much younger than myself. They seem in front of me. Life has revealed to them her latest wonder. As for the age, I always contradict the age. I do it on principle. If you ask them their opinion on something that happened yesterday, they solemnly give you the opinion current in 1820. People were high stock, believed in everything, and knew absolutely nothing. How lovely that thing you are playing it. I wonder, did Chopin write it at Majorca, with the sea weeping round the villa, and the salt spray dashing against the pane? It is marvelously romantic. What a blessing it is that there is one art left to us that is not imitative. Don't stop. I want music. It seems to me that you are the young apostle, that you are the young Apollo, and that I am Marsyas, listening to you. I have sorrows, Dorian, of my own, that even you know nothing of. The tragedy of old age is not that one is old, but that one is young. I am amazed sometimes at my own sincerity. Ah, Dorian, how happy you are. What an exquisite life you have had. You have drunk deeply of everything. You have crushed the grapes against your palate. Nothing has been hidden from you. And it has all been to you, no more than the sound of music. It has not marred you. You are still the same.
I am not the same, Harry.
Yes, you are the same. I wonder what the rest of your life. Don't spoil it by renunciations. At present you are perfect type. Don't make yourself incomplete. You are quite flawless. You need not shake your head. You know you are. Besides, Dorian, don't deceive yourself. Life is not governed by will or intent. Life is a question of nerves and fibers, and slowly built up cells in which thought hides itself and passion has its dreams. You may fancy yourself safe and think yourself strong, but a chant, tone of color in a room, or a morning sky, a particular perfume you had once loved, and that brings subtle memories with it, a line from a forgotten poem that you again, cadence from a piece of music that you had ceased to play. I tell you, Dorian, that it is on things like these that our lives depend. Browning writes about that somewhere, but our own senses will imagine them for us. They are moments when the odor of Lilas Blanc passes suddenly across, and I have to live the strangest month of my life over again. I wish I could change places with you, Dorian. The world has cried out against both us, but it has always worshipped. It always will worship. You are the type of what the age is searching for. What it is afraid, it is. I am so glad that you had never done anything, never carved a statue or painted a picture or produced anything outside of yourself. Life has been your art. You have set yourself to music. Your days are your sonnet. Dorian rose up from the piano, passed his hand through his hair.
Yes, life has been exquisite.
He murmured,
But I'm not going to have the same life, Harry. And you must not say these extravagant things to me. You don't know everything about me. Think that if you did, even you would turn from me. You laugh. Don't laugh.
Why have you stopped playing, Dorian? Go back and give me the nocturnal over again. Look at that great, funny-colored moon that hangs in the dusty air. She is waiting for you to charm her, and if you play, she will come closer to the earth. You won't? Let us go to the club. It has been a charming evening, and we must end it charmingly. There is someone at White's who wants immensely to know you. Young Lord Poole, Bournemouth's eldest son. He has already copied your necktie, and has begged me to introduce him to you. He is quite delightful, and rather reminds me of you,
I hope not.
said Dorian with a sad look in his eye.
But I am tired tonight, Harry. I shan't go to the club. It is nearly 11, and I want to go to bed early.
Do stay. You have never played so well as tonight. There was something in your touch that was wonderful. It had more expression than I had ever heard before.
It is because I'm going to be good.
He answered, smiling.
I am a little changed already.
You cannot change me, Dorian, said Lord Henry.
Cannot change
You and
me.
I will always be friends.
Yet you poisoned me with a book once. I should not forgive that. Harry, promise me that you will never lend that book to anyone. It does harm.
My dear boy, you are really beginning to moralize. You'll soon be going about like the converted and the revivalists, warning people against all the sin of which you have grown tired. You are much too delightful to do that. Besides, it is no use. You and I are what we are, and we will be what we will be. As for being poisoned by a book, there is no such thing as that. Art has no influence upon action. It annihilates the desire to. It is superbly sterile. The books that the world calls immoral are books that show the world its own shame. That is all. But we won't discuss literature. Come round tomorrow. I am going to ride at 11. We might go together, and I will take you to lunch after. That Lady Branksome. With Lady Branksome. She is a charming woman, and wants to consult you about some tapestries she is thinking of buying. Mind you come, or shall we lunch with our little Duchess? She says she never sees you now. Perhaps you are tired of Gladys? I thought you would be. Her clever tongue gets on one's nerves. Well, in any case, be here at 11.
Must I really come, Harry?
Certainly. The park is quite lovely now. I don't think there have been such lilacs since the year I met you.
Very well. I shall be here at 11.
Said Dorian.
Good night, Harry.
As he reached for the door, hesitated for a moment, as if he had something more to say. Then he sighed and went out.
Love that he, kind of low-key admits to killing Basil.
That felt kind of high key. That was kind of suspicious.
No, but he couldn't. He can't. Dorian doesn't have it in him to kill anyone.
Oh, I think
As
that's gonna
as
push
he
him to.
kills Lord Henry. He's next.
What were you saying? Sorry.
Hmm?
What were you saying?
No, that's okay.
Dang. How
Alright,
did you
well.
feel
Mm,
when you first read this?
weirded out. I was like, why is Dorian so weird? At first, I was like, bro, he's such a narcissist. And then, all the weird stuff starts happening. Like, death pretty much follows him, whether he causes it or
Mm.
not. And it's a little strange.
Mm. Wow, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, like, now all of a sudden, after James Vane dies on accident, right? Not by his hand, but dies on accident.
Mm-hmm.
He now all of a
Mm-hmm.
sudden has this like existential crisis of like, oh, I survived. He was gonna kill
Mm.
me, but now I've survived. So now I have to be good. You know,
Yeah.
but at the same time, it's like, Dorian doesn't know how to be good because he just said
Mm-hmm.
that like he broke this girl's heart who he claims that he loved her at one point, but then like ended up not doing anything more with her and just
Mm-hmm.
like kind of left her as a good deed or a good action.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Got
Yes, he's quite weird.
he is. It's denial. He's
He's in denial.
yeah
I see.
convinced he's doing good, but
Yeah.
still committing these acts.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know, man. I feel like Henry's gonna die.
He's next.
I feel like it. It almost felt like it could be pushing him, like making him feel guilty
Mm.
by Lord Henry saying that, "Oh no, you're good, you're good, you're." I don't believe that of you.
Yeah.
Dorian is like fighting. Was that the internal battle and
Mhm.
also getting mad hearing that because of how much shame he has.
Yeah. And guaranteed, he still has the painting.
Oof.
Guaranteed, he still has the painting, and he's just lying, saying that he lost it, so that people will think like, oh, he doesn't have the painting.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Oh, what if Lord Henry will be his other victim?
Oh.
Like, look at it the same way Basil did, and he'll be like, "You made me.
Yeah.
Now die.
You created me.
Now you must be punished."
Yeah. All right. Last chapter. Last chapter. Are we ready?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Chapter 20. It was a lovely night, so warm that he threw his coat over his arm and did not even put his silk scarf around his throat. As he strolled home, smoking his cigarette, two young men in evening dress passed him. He heard one of them whisper to the other, "That is Dorian Gray." He remembered how pleased he used to be when he was pointed out, or stared at, or talked about. He was tired of hearing his own name now. Half the charm of the little village where he had been so often lately was that no one knew who he was. He had often told the girl whom he had lured to love him that he was poor, and she had believed him. He had told her once that he was wicked, and she had laughed at him and answered that wicked people were always very old and very ugly. What a laugh she had! Just like a thrush singing. And how pretty she had been in her cotton dress and her large hats. She knew nothing, but she had everything that he had lost. When he reached home, he found his servant waiting up for him. He sent him to bed and threw himself down on the sofa in the library and began to think over some of the things that Lord Henry had said to him. Was it really true that one could never change? He felt a wild longing for the unstained purity of his boyhood, his rose-white boyhood, as Lord Henry had once called it. He knew that he had tarnished himself, filled his mind with corruption, and given horror to his fancy, that he had been an evil influence to others, and had experienced a terrible joy in being so, and that of the lives that had crossed his own, it had been the fairest and the most full of promise that he had brought to shame. But was it all irretrievable? Was there no hope for him? Ah, in what a monstrous moment of pride and passion he had prayed till the portrait should bear the burden of his days, and he keep the unsullied splendor of eternal youth. All his failure had been due to that. Better for him that each sin of his life had brought its sure, swift penalty along with it. There was purification in punishment. Not forgive us our sins, but smite us for our iniquities, should be the prayer of man to the most just God. The curiously carved mirror that Lord Henry had given to him so many years ago now was standing on the table, and the white-limbed cupids laughed round it as of old. He took it up, as he had done on that night of horror when he had first noted the change in the fatal picture, and with wild, tear-dimmed eyes looked into its polished shield. Once someone who had terribly loved him had written to him a mad letter, ending with these idolatrous words: "The world is changed because you are made of ivory and gold. The curves of your lips rewrite history." The phrases came back to his memory, and he repeated them over and over to himself. Then he loathed his own beauty, and flinging the mirror on the ground, crushed it into silver splinters beneath his heel. It was his beauty that had ruined him, his beauty and the youth that he had prayed for. But for those two things, his life might have been free from satin, or stain. Stain and satin, free of them. His beauty had been to him but a mask, his youth but a mockery. What was youth at best? A green and unripe time, a time of shallow moods and sickly thoughts. Why had he worn it? Why had he worn its livery? Youth had spoiled him. It was better not to think of the past. Nothing could alter that. It was of himself and of his own future that he had to think. James Vane was hidden in a nameless grave in Selby churchyard. Alan Campbell had shot himself one night in his laboratory, but had not revealed the secret that he had been forced to know. The excitement, such as it was, over Basil Hallward's disappearance would soon pass away. It was already waning. He was perfectly safe there. Nor, indeed, was it the death of Basil Hallward that weighed most upon his mind. It was the living death of his own soul that troubled him. Basil had painted the portrait that had marred his life. He could not forgive him that. It was the portrait that had done everything. Basil had said things to him that were unbearable, and that he had yet borne with patience. The murder had been simply the madness of a moment, and as for Alan Campbell, his suicide had been his own act. He had chosen to do it. It was nothing to him. A new life. That was what he wanted. That was what he was waiting for. Surely he had begun it already. He had spared one innocent thing, at any rate. He would never again tempt innocence. He would be good. As he thought of Hetty Merton, he began to wonder if the portrait in the locked room had changed. Surely it was not still so horrible as it had been. Perhaps if his life became pure, he would be able to expel every sign of evil passion from the face. Perhaps the signs of evil had already gone away. He would go and look. He took the lamp from the table and crept upstairs. As he unbarred the door, a smile of joy flitted across his strangely youth-looking face, and lingered for a moment about his lips. Yes, he would be good, and the hideous thing that he had hidden away would no longer be a terror to him. He felt as if the load had been lifted from him already. He went in quietly, locking the door behind him, as was his custom, and dragged the purple hanging from the portrait. A cry of pain and indignation broke from him. He could see no change, save that in the eyes there was a look of cunning, and in the mouth the curved wrinkle of a hypocrite. Of a hypocrite? The thing was still loathsome, more loathsome, if possible, than before, and the scarlet dew that spotted the hand seemed brighter, and more like blood newly spilled. Then he trembled. Had it been merely the vanity that had made him do his one good deed, or the desire for a new sensation, as Lord Henry had hinted, with his mocking laugh, or that passion to act a part that sometimes makes us do things finer than we are ourselves, or perhaps all these things, or all these. And why was the red stain larger than it had been? It seemed to have crept like a horrible disease over the wrinkled fingers. There was blood on the painted feet, as though the thing had dripped. Blood even on the hand that had not held the knife. Confess? Did it mean that he was to confess? To give himself up and be put to death? He laughed. He felt that the idea was monstrous. Besides, even if he did confess, who would believe him? There was no trace of the murdered man anywhere. Everything belonging to him had been destroyed. He himself had burned what had been below stairs. The world would simply say that he was mad. They would shut him up if he persisted in his story. Yet it was his duty to confess, to suffer public shame, and to make public atonement. There was a God who called upon men to tell their sins to earth as well as to heaven. Nothing that he could do would cleanse him till he had told his own sin. His sin? He shrugged his shoulders. The death of Basil Hallward seemed very little to him. He was thinking of Hetty Merton, for it was an unjust mirror, this mirror of his soul he was looking at. Vanity, curiosity, hypocrisy. Had there been nothing more in his renunciation than that? There had been something more. At least he thought so. But who could tell? No. There had to be something. There had been nothing more. Through vanity, he had spared her. In hypocrisy, he had worn the mask of goodness. For curiosity's sake, he had tried the denial of self. He recognized that now. But this murder, was it to dog him all his life? Was he always to be burdened by his past? Was he really to confess? Never. There was only one bit of evidence left against him. The picture itself. That was evidence. He would destroy it. Why had he kept it so long? Once it had given him pleasure to watch it changing and growing old. Of late he felt no such pleasure. It had kept him awake at night. When he had been away, he had been filled with terror lest other eyes should look upon it. It had brought melancholy across his passions. Its mere memory had marred many moments of joy. It had been like conscious to him. Yes, it had been conscious. He would destroy it. He looked round and saw the knife that had stabbed Basil Hallward. He had cleaned it many times, till there was no stain left upon it. It was bright and glistened, as if it had killed the painter, so it would kill the painter's work, and all that meant. It would kill the past, and when that was dead, he would be free. It would kill this monstrous soul life, and without its hideous warnings, he would be at peace. He seized the thing and stabbed the picture with it. There was a cry heard, and a crash. The cry was so horrible in its agony that the frightened servants woke and crept out of their rooms. Two gentlemen who were passing in the square below stopped and looked up at the great house. They walked on till they met a policeman and brought him back. The man rang the bell several times, but there was no answer, except for a light in one of the top windows. The house was all dark. After a time he went away and stood in a adjoining portico and watched. Portico?
I think Portugal.
Portico, yeah, and watched. You can be this one. Now be the policeman.
Whose house is that, Constable?
Ask the elder of the two gentlemen. Mr. Dorian Gray's, sir, answered the policeman. They looked at each other as they walked away and sneered. One of them was Sir Henry Ashton's uncle. Indeed, in the servants' part of the house, the half-clad domestics were talking in low whispers to each other. Old Mrs. Leaf was crying and wringing her hands. Francis was as pale as death. After about a quarter of an hour, he got the coachman and one of the footmen and crept upstairs. They knocked, but there was no reply. They called out. Everything was still. Finally, after vainly trying to force the door, they got on the roof and dropped down onto the balcony. The windows yielded easily. Their bolts were old. When they entered, they found hanging upon the wall a splendid portrait of their master, as they had last seen him, in all the wonder of his exquisite youth and beauty. Lying on the floor was a dead man, in evening dress, with a knife in his heart. He was withered, wrinkled, and loathsome of visage. It was still not till they had examined the rings that they recognized who it was. The end.
Oh.
Dun dun dun.
Huh.
And so we have it. He's
Wow.
I wish his death was more exciting.
dead. But how fitting for a guy like him
Yeah.
to be the one to kill himself inadvertently. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So any thoughts?
So, very thought-provoking.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like it kind of like, what do you call that? It didn't make it as eerie
Yeah.
because it was almost like we could like what is that? It kind of dissipated that eeriness with thought-provoking moments that
Mm.
like whenever they were sharing their thoughts or opinions, philosophical things.
Mm.
But I think it was very interesting for that time period. I wonder how it was perceived, like received.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, I do wonder the popularity of this book when it first came out.
What do you think? I guess what are your feelings about it for you both?
Hmm. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like it's a good story
Mm.
with like just but I feel like the all the psychological and philosophical parts just like flew over my head because
Mm-hmm.
especially from Lord Henry's because I'm like, man, this guy is just so cynical,
Mm-hmm.
pessimistic, all of the above. I don't know, man. I'm
Yeah.
like, bro, this guy needs something good in his life. Like,
But
listen,
I
like
do
let
appreciate all the quotes.
yes from the women,
Mm-hmm.
from the women specifically, because yeah, Lord Henry is just like he's a real Debbie Downer.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
like, yeah, I get it. Life sucks and everything and whatnot, but you know, you could good things can still happen.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you can enjoy life. You don't have to be
Right.
miserable all the time.
Right. It seemed like Gladys was was his match though, like in challenging each other's thoughts and opinions.
Yeah. It would be his own cousin to challenge him, right?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah. Oh.
What a
All right.
psycho.
Yeah. Yeah. Kind of. Yeah.
Dang. So I wonder if it was like a heart attack that um
Hmm?
did it did it say that he was like stabbed or anything?
Yeah. He
Or
had a
did he,
knife in his chest,
oh
like how he stabbed the painting.
mhm. Okay.
Yeah.
Mirror like.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Well, what a what a classic to start off for spooky season. Even though it wasn't,
Mm-hmm.
I told you, Kelsey, it wasn't that spooky.
It
Ooh,
was just suspenseful.
the painting killed him.
Ooh.
Ooh, I mean, ooh,
Ooh.
ooh,
Ooh.
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 Um,
And now we get, I believe Dracula is also like the same thing, or like a
Mhm.
probably more leaning towards Frankenstein horror, quote unquote horror.
Mhm.
spooky.
Yeah, where it's just like you not like jump scare-ish. But then again, how can you do jump scares in books? Maybe I don't know. I feel like it would be really hard to like write a horror book, like a horror movie,
Yeah.
because you don't get the
Like
visuals, you don't get the music.
mhm. You're like reading it and then it's like, oh, you can't
Ah,
get scared like,
yeah, like oh no.
oh.
Ah. Oh yeah. Okay. Well.
Maybe if you listen to an audiobook.
Oh,
Wow.
there it is. I bet the writers never did think that people would get paid to read their books for other people.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, okay. Well, next book is Dracula. Blah blah blah.
Blah.